Pokémon, the first movie. I remember back when I was a kid, I was a major Pokémon fan. Well, technically I still am now since I'm still playing the games, but between the late 1990s up to the mid-2000s, I was obsessed with anything Pokémon. I collected the original 151 cards, I collected the little figurines, my Game Boys would 80% of the time have a Pokemon game on its system, I would check out the movies whenever they're in theaters, and I would always catch the anime whenever it was on TV. It was always a blast watching Ash and Pikachu's adventures with Misty and Brock on his journey to be the Pokemon Master, and always meeting new Pokemon and people along their way. So, of course, when the first movie came out in North America at the end of 1999, it was a big event for me and my friends to see those awesome battles on the big screen, especially when we got to encounter not only the legendary Mewtwo and Mew, but also never before seen Pokemon that would appear in the upcoming second generation. Now, it's been more than a decade since I've fully seen this one, so this will be quite a nostalgia trip for me. But when revisiting the film after all those years, was the film as epic as I thought it was when I was a kid? Or should this movie be blasted into stone? Let's find out. The story. I will admit that I was surprised to find that it does have a bit of a legitimate story to tell. When the movie begins, it looks into the origins of Mewtwo, where he tries to find purpose with his life, but ends up surrounding himself with the wrong people who want to use his power for their own benefit. Soon afterwards, he would ditch them all with a grudge against all humanity for the way that he views as enslaving Pokemon. Now, this is a pretty solid setup for a strong potential plot. Does it take advantage of that? Well, not really. Following afterwards, it's more like an extended episode where Ash and the gang gets invited to go face off the greatest Pokemon Master, who turns out to be Mewtwo, and has to stop him before he wipes out the human race in order to take over the world. You see, the whole purpose of the movie is completely based around Mewtwo, including the purpose of his creation, the power that he holds, and aspects regarding who he was cloned from, Mew. Luckily, it does look into it from time to time to build up his character, but most of the stuff that occurs in the film is no different than what the show would normally deliver with battles and the Team Rocket shenanigans. And then it would completely switch things up at the last 20 minutes, where it goes from your regular Pokemon battles to an entire anti-war PSA. I don't mind that it wants to incorporate a message into the film, and it is a good message to spread out, but it just goes on with characters continuously lecturing how fighting is wrong, and it ultimately leads to nobody winning.
I'd rather risk my life out in Mewtwo's storm than watch these Pokemon destroy each other. This just proves that fighting is wrong. Pokemon aren't meant to fight. Not like this. It's useless. What can come out of it?
You know, that's actually a very good statement. If it weren't for the fact that it is literally the whole point of the entire franchise, and considering how everybody is still battling each other with all different kinds of Pokemon for many years after the movie, you have just said the words that have been heard by no one. I will give the story credit that it did try to be a movie with the elements of Mewtwo, but for the most part, it mainly delivered a longer episode from the series. The animation. For fans who still watch the anime to this day, they would look back at something like this and would feel like the animation is completely primitive by today's standards. Yes, I am aware that the show's quality has improved over the years, but back then, going from the series to this was quite a noticeable upgrade, most namely regarding the flow of the characters' movements. In the character animation, the movements are a lot smoother than in the anime, and they accommodate well to keep up with the fast-paced action that would occur when the Pokemon would fight or during an intense moment. In a way, that's what separates the series from the movie. The latter delivers richer-looking battles with more frames per second implemented onto most of the scenes. Here's the thing, it did it in most. It does happen in some scenes, however, that the quality would go back down, looking like how it normally was in the show during the late 1990s. Then again, it does help a bit to stay true with the look of the series, especially with the designs presenting a simpler anime look onto the humans, but save most of the creative energy onto the Pokemon themselves. In fact, it does manage to stay true with the franchise's main selling point, which are the battles, and they are done well with the different attacks and the strong use of effects, both in 2D and 3D. The only criticism I would have on that front is that they are pretty far from each other, so it can happen when the flow of the feature can sometimes go pretty quick and then feel slow. As for the backgrounds, while a lot of it looks plain, the only interesting place is New Island, where Mewtwo resides and even built an entire fortress in his image from the remains of the old laboratory where he was created. Sure, it is a little far from the quality of animated features of its time, but coming from an anime series from the late 90s, what the animation delivered here is quite decent. The characters. Before I continue on to the characters, allow me to explain one of the biggest problems with the movie. While its core audience is the fans of the series, it doesn't even care about any non-Pokemon fans. While it focuses a lot on the characteristics of Mewtwo, it puts little to no effort in even describing what are Pokemon and who characters like Ash, Misty, and Brock are. In other words, if someone comes in this without the slightest knowledge of Pokemon in general, they would feel unwelcome and mostly lost with what's going on. With that said, it also affects onto the recurring characters as well, since they're only presenting just a bit of who they are in the show here, including Ash as the high-spirited trainer who's aiming to be the best and views his Pokemon as his best friends, Misty and Brock are his supporters to cheer him on in his battles, and Team Rocket, which consists of Jessie, James, and a talking Meowth, are the comic reliefs that always plot to steal Ash's Pikachu. However, in the case of the movie, their purpose is to help feed onto the plot by discovering more of Mewtwo's past.
There goes Alakazam!
As for the other characters like the trainers in New Island, there really isn't much about them other than just being trainers that want to fight the Pokemon Master. But then, you have Mewtwo himself, the one that the movie puts so much of its energy onto. As I've stated before, the movie does give him a proper backstory and development in order to be a fully fleshed out character. While the purpose of his creation is to be like any other Pokemon and fight others by the command of his trainer, he rejects all that because he knows that he is capable of doing much more, yet is always in pursuit to find his purpose in life. In other words, a good summary of Mewtwo is,
"Who am I? Can I encase myself in slavery? Pretend I do not see my agony. This Pokemon that bears my face, I'll battle him to take his place.
Who am I?"
But in all seriousness, while he mostly is executed as the villain of the movie, there is a noticeable depth into him that shows that the movie is trying to make audiences' encounter with the legendary Pokemon feel more special than what you would get on television. While Mewtwo does try to be memorable and complex, the others seem to care more about their Pokemon battles than to be legitimate characters. We all know Ash Ketchum as the trainer that wants to be the very best like no one ever was. If only the movie can have that determination. Pokemon, the first movie, delivers what fans of the anime would want from an encounter with Mewtwo, but on its own, it doesn't have much to offer and feels like it caters more to a specific audience rather than something both fans and non-fans can enjoy. I'll give it that the animation is solid, the character of Mewtwo is interesting, and does try a bit more to be an actual movie than most films based directly on a series, but it falls a little short with not much story and characters that offer nothing new on the table. Now, I'm sure that a lot of people out there are probably wondering regarding my thoughts on the 20-minute short that showed before the film, Pikachu's Vacation. Well, For the most part, it's more like a cute little cartoon of a bunch of Pokemon getting into all sorts of crazy situations. It's nothing too serious, just a little fun watch for Pokemon fans. Technically, I've already said this, but my only recommendation is that you need a basic amount of knowledge of what Pokemon is in order to watch and understand this film. So, fans of the original series will enjoy this more. Otherwise, if you don't know Pokemon, then it's probably best to skip this one. Its stats are not really useful in battles, but it is something that does look nice in your PC box. Hey guys, this is Animat, and I will say that it definitely was an interesting experience revisiting Pokemon the first movie after all these years. But one thing I will say though, that upon my revisitation, there was one thing that I said to myself so many times, like I had to repeat this in order to prepare to go and watch Pokemon the first movie, and that was, I will not cry at that specific scene. I will not cry at that specific scene. I will not cry at that specific scene. And I'm sure you guys know exactly which one I'm talking about. But the interesting thing though is that when that scene actually happened in that film, and you actually do see Pikachu's tears, like you see him like close up and he's looking down at Ash and he starts to cry, that's when my feelings watch it, and I was like, oh no. Oh no. Because like my heart completely sank. And I will say that despite all its flaws, I will give the movie that certain scene in particular is actually very well executed, where they do play up the sadness really well. And I would actually say that it was actually quite reminiscent to Mufasa's death in The Lion King, when you see that build up when Simba is trying to convince Mufasa to wake up and he doesn't want to believe that he's dead, and then you see his tears roll down as he accepts that he's ultimately gone. And the same thing was with that scene when Pikachu had to accept that Ash was ultimately gone. Now, I know that some of you might think that I'm absolutely crazy for comparing Pokemon the first movie, out of all things, to The Lion King, but, you know, there are some similarities in that moment, and I would like to know what you think. Which scene do you think is actually better executed and is a lot more tragic? Is it the scene with Ash and Pikachu, or is it the scene with Mufasa and Simba? It's a very interesting analysis, but other than that, I will say, though, that it was pretty interesting to revisit it. Yeah, technically, it's not as epic and grand as it was when I was a kid watching it, but, you know, it was something. At least, it is fascinating to go back into something that was a part of my childhood now as an adult. Oh, and one more thing. I don't think I really answered the question if I really did cry, and actually, I would say no. I knew it was coming, so that did help out, but I did manage to fight back the tears. None of it came out. Like, at the most, I only felt my heart sinking. And I can reassure you, though, that when I was a kid watching that in theaters, I was absolutely bawling. So I did cry at that scene at one point in my life, but not this time for the purpose of this review. But anyways, now that all that has been said, sorry, I didn't know why I wasn't able to talk at that moment. Now let us go, and we shall go and move on to the animation hat. And one more thing before I draw, I would like to remind you guys that if you like to suggest an animated film that you would like me to review and that I would put onto the animation hat, then all you have to do is write me an email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. Alright, so with all that said, let's go ahead and see where we can go with this. Oh, crap. I felt one on my leg and I don't... Oh, there we go! Okay, never mind. I felt one on my leg bouncing off, but I'll pick that up later. So anyways, the next review shall be
tell. This is going to be a very fascinating one. Okay. Okay. Funny enough, I actually did get a lot of requests for this, but very fascinatingly enough, what we are about to see is going to be one of the first ever animated features that's not from Disney. But I wouldn't say one of the first ones ever. I would say this is one of the first non-Disney animated features to be released right after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
And so, trainers, you see it's true. These trapped creatures should not serve you. Who am I?